Ada, would you like to be a dissenting voice?
I feel if we are not able to deliver on our next episode, you should just know that too.
Yes, we'll be classified as dissenting voices. Alright, you're welcome to 0100 Niger.
It's your host, Da.
And this is the scientist welcoming you to the Nigerian Review podcast.
Another banging episode.
Right, so you listened to our last episode from last week.
6.
Right.
I think it's episode number 7 right now.
Yeah, this is 7. Last week was 6 on the problems of Nigeria and the Barnabas EP review. We hope you enjoyed that so much. You enjoyed the review we did on the Kiss Daniels Barnabas. Yeah, EP.
I actually went back to the city. It was a nice album.
Right. So in fact, coming into this episode, I was thinking if maybe we should do another album review on this one too. Okay. Right, so I was contemplating maybe Black Bones, SOL, the deluxe version, or one other album that has been making rounds in social media, particularly, and has been a bit controversial too, especially with that one track featuring Rema, that of the Neptunes album, of course. But I don't think we will have time for that, particularly because I haven't even listened to the DJ Neptunes album yet. Well, I've been rocking Black Bones album though, right? But all that, we'll put that in consideration for subsequent episodes. Today, though, we will be moving on to the episode 7 of the podcast. We will be discussing, like we promised in the previous episode, we promised we will be discussing on the nature of Nigerian society today. And today we'll be keeping up to that promise, and we'll be discussing about a very important aspect of Nigerian society, which is Nigerian politics.
In this episode, we're going to delve right into the problem with Nigeria.
Right. But before we go into all that, we would like to make an announcement. You see, this episode will be the last one for this year.
Sadly.
Right. The next time will be
to announce that will be it for this year. You're going to stop.
Well, it's nothing to regret. It's just that the scientists have some science to do. Right. You have to take care of the science. The science calls, so we have to answer, right?
Yes.
You have to answer, and the next time you'll be hearing from us, we'll promising you'll be coming with major improvements to the show, and you come with much more improved content, much more developed content than we've been giving you so far. Right. So that's it. Let's delve right in. Right. So on this episode today, like we said, we'll be discussing on Nigerian politics. Right, and the state of Nigerian society. We're coming at it from a particular angle, right? And that is that we want to see, is Nigeria, can it be said to be a right-wing society? Right? Does it have all it takes? Does it tick all the right boxes for it to be considered a right-wing society? And if you wonder what we mean by a right-wing society, this is not a particularly commonplace lingo around here. It's not a thing we actually use to describe politics around here, right? But it's a thing that, much as it applies elsewhere, actually applies to us here too. You know, the right-left spectrum, right? Yeah, it does apply to us here very well too, and that's what we'll be delving into and looking at today. Right. So before we go in and see what we mean by what right-wing politics or what a right-wing society is, we will first have to define a simple term, which is social stratification. So what is social stratification? And I will help us with that.
Yeah, I think it just refers to society, the society's organization of its people into group based on the socio-economic factors like income, wealth, race, and education, basically. See,
and in our case, also with ethnicity, gender, right, occupation,
social status,
or even derived power in many cases, right? Now, typically, the determining structures of social stratification arises from the inequalities of status amongst persons. Right? Therefore, the degree of social inequality in such a society determines
by the social class.
Yeah, it determines the person's stratum or his class. Right now, that's with the social stratification. Right-wing politics, right, supports the view that certain orders and hierarchies are inevitable, right? That they are inevitable, they are natural, they are normal, or even desirable, and that they typically support this position based on the basis of natural law, economics, or even tradition in most cases, right? Right-wing politics involves in various degrees the rejection of egalitarian objectives of left-wing politics.
Right? Equal.
We'll see what we mean by left-wing politics too shortly. And they do this claiming that either that social or economic inequality is natural, like we said, and inevitable, or that it is beneficial to society.
In other words, when Orwell was saying in his book Animal Farm that all animals are equal, but some are more equal than others, he's actually stating the view of right-wing politicians or far-right politicians, whichever they are, all right-wing enemies, right? They believe that people are not meant to all be equal, and they are meant to be classified based on certain characteristics and social inequalities.
Now, as we've done to describe right-wing politics, we will have to do well for us to look into what we mean by the opposite of it,
which is left-wing.
The left-wing politics, right? Now, so left-wing politics, in briefly, simply supports social equality and egalitarianism, often in opposition of social hierarchy, right, or social stratification, like we define. Left-wing politics typically involves a concern for those in society whom its adherents, that's the left-wing politics adherent, the people who adhere to the philosophy of left-wing politics, that they perceive as disadvantaged relative to others, as well as a belief that there are unjustified inequalities that need to be reduced or abolished in society. Now, the nomenclature, right, of right-wing, left-wing politics, right, and the spectrum itself, this particular spectrum of politics, division of politics, it arose, right, in 18th century, in late 18th century France, during the French Revolution. In the years preceding the revolution and in the years of the revolution, of course. We're talking about 1789, the revolution started in 1789 France. Now, it originated then, and it was in reference to the seating arrangement of the French Parliament, also called at that point in time the Estates General, that were formed just before the beginning of the revolution. In the city, the arrangement in the parliament was such that the people who sat to the right of the chair of the presiding officer, right, were those that were generally in support of the institution of the monarchy, of the old regime, the ancien regime, as they call it in France, which is the nobility. We are talking about the nobility or second estate now. They sit to the right of the presiding officer, right, which is a representative of the monarchy, while people who sit to the left, at the other hand, are the people that they are made up of, people from the commoners or the third estate now, right, in France. So that's where the nomenclature arose from. People who support the monarchy and what the monarchy represents, including the oppression and the economic system of the monarchy then. The feudal systems and everything, the feudalism and everything. Yeah, right. So they start to the right, and then the people who were more in favor of the development and the establishment of an egalitarian society, right, were sitting on the left. The word egalitarian itself, I think its origin is from French. One of the mottos of the French Revolution was liberté, égalité, fraternité. Liberty, égalité, meaning equality, right? And fraternity, brotherhood among the strugglers. And then egalitarian society then means one in which every member of the society is equal, right? They have equal rights, they have equal standing, no class,
no sex,
right? you have sexes, yeah. You just don't have classes. All right. So the terms right and left wing therefore have not been used to just describe physical characteristics of the party, right? Since the early days, they were only used in the early days. Ever since then, since the days of the usage of these terms, ever since then, they have been used to describe the principles, ideas, and philosophy espoused by individual political parties or politicians. So in this case now, the people who have more conservative ideologies or mindsets, right? In terms of if they stand for what the monarchies of old stood for, right? They are described as right wing, and people who stood for equality in society and development and the establishment of who had more progressive ideas are described as belonging to the left wing. So that's about the origin. Alright. Following that, the revolution in France spread to other areas of Europe, and then led to the adoption of many of the ideas that were developed that were espoused in France during the revolutionary years in other parts of Europe. Including almost a century later in Russia, in the Russian Revolution that took place in the early 20th century. However, coming home now to Nigeria, right? So how does this apply to us, right? How does this apply to us? Given that today you hear of Nigerian politics, you hear of Nigerian politicians, doing their politicking, but you don't really know what their stance is based on this, and that's mostly because you hear of government systems, political systems when you study government in school, in secondary school, right? But they don't really go into the details of how these systems came to be and how does it apply to us as a country. For example, they actually teach us about the economic systems we espouse and that we practice here. It says to be a mixed economic system, right? With subsequent exposure to these ideas and ideals that are obtainable elsewhere, you find out that Nigeria seems to be a country of paradoxes, right? We practice a mixed economic system, right? But our politics is actually less mixed.
Right.
It's less mixed. It's not progressive at all. It's very restrictive and very conservative.
I personally describe Nigeria as a far-right society, not just far right.
Yeah, you're jumping to conclusions. We are still yet to arrive at that. Right now, but so
there's no room for progressive views. It's just the way it is. It should remain the way it is.
Right. That's how the politics have been.
Yes,
is being practiced.
But everyone.
Not how it should be, but it's what is obtainable presently. Alright. So actually, throughout the duration of explicit colonization in Nigeria, right? Because like we said previously, the colonizers left, but colonization didn't end, right?
Implicitly,
right? So there was we still have implicit colonization, although the explicit one had ended back then. So throughout the duration of explicit colonization in Nigeria, the British colonialists, who themselves had been described as having right-wing stances for various reasons, including they being actively stamping out whatever they perceive as communist tendencies. So you have people who band together for their collective good as against the oppressors, have been stamped out very violently. We made allusions previously to the origins of the Nigerian police and how they were used by the colonialists back in the day. We'll still come back to that when we finally get to do our NSAS episode. So just talking about the colonialists then, so they were rather adamant in their various acts that ultimately served to entrench inequality in the region that is to become Nigeria, right? In the region at the time. So what acts were these we're talking about? This they include, their impactful differential treatment of the various parts of what is to become the country of Nigeria, right? As well as the intentional entrenchment of existing monarchies through the indirect rule system and their introduction of monarchies now to places in the country where they were not even in existence prior to them colonialists coming. We're talking about, specifically now we're talking about areas of the southeast that had been Republican for centuries,
yes.
And then with the coming of colonialists, they imposed warrant chiefs and artificial. Call it artificial. It's all artificial anyways. All power is artificial. Artificial rulers on them. Right now, as discussed in previous episodes, also, this act of theirs made the talking specifically now about indirect rule, right? In the position of indirect rule. It made the traditional rulers a powerful class, especially following independence, and as is characteristics of their kind, talking about the traditional rulers now, they proceeded to do whatever they deemed necessary to maintain their power, right? This reminds you of the quote, right, about monarchs, right? Monarchs fearing for their throne. Right, so they will do anything to maintain their power.
Speaking about monarchs, I heard the Queen is not more the leader of Barbados, but the exchange. She's not.
Oh really?
Yeah.
Oh, I've been out of touch.
Appointed a new president or elected rather.
Oh, so that's similar to. So they finally got their own republic.
Yes, they
just similar to what Nigeria did 3 years after independence, 1963.
Yeah, I was like, I thought these guys were the republic.
No, you see, it's.
They're still part of the Commonwealth, sure.
Exactly. It's similar. At Barbados is a small country.
Yeah.
So you find that these smaller countries find it difficult at times to remove themselves from the influence of the colonial masters. You also have many offshore countries that are still under the British.
Yeah.
Even though they don't get any major benefits from that. Yeah. Congratulations to Barbados.
Welcome to the club.
Welcome to the club. We see you in the next 50 years. Maybe you'll be where Nigeria is today still. But then. Thanks for the bringing our attention anyways. Now, right, we're talking about the monarchs, right? About how the indirect rule made them a very powerful class following independence, right? And as you're saying, as characteristics of their kind, right, world over, they proceeded to do whatever they deemed necessary to maintain their power. And that led to their increased direction of the country's politics. Right? They did this both directly, since many of their own children made up the bulk of the educated elites at that time, in the early years then. And then they did it also indirectly by influencing the others, people who, the rest of the educated elite, who were not from the royal class then, but were from their areas of influence. They exerted their influence upon them too, however they could. And then you find this happened a lot back then. In fact, it still does today. But it was happening to a greater extent back then. And then these happenings, right, were some of the primary causes for the state of turmoil. The way they waded into the politics, and they disrupted the process for their own personal good, like they've been known to do, everywhere monarchs have been known to exist. So these acts of theirs were the primary causes for the state of turmoil that the country found itself in the first couple of years following independence, right, leading to the first coup in 66 and the transition of the country into military authoritarian rule, right? Those first couple of years were hard ones, for Nigeria. Because following independence, right, there was this birth of hope, about what the country could get to be, how the country now has its own destiny, in its own hand, and how it could, lead its people to real glory in short term, and not just its own people, but the black race and the African continent as a whole, right? So these years the first couple of years were just particularly, hard for the people and disappointing too. By 64, like we said, by 64, you had what was called, the wet year riots in the southwest, where you have these political opponents, just participating in arson, setting fire to the business places and personal properties of their opponents. All over, and that wasn't just happening in the southwest; it was happening elsewhere, all over the middle belt. The census that took place in the early years, then there was major debate about its legitimacy and the accuracy of the result, and stuff all over then. And most of the controversy that happened then, not all of it, but most of it, could directly be traced to the influence that the traditional rulers were having on the politics of the country in those early years. Right. Now, like we just said, those disturbances that the country had was what forced the hands of the number of people who participated in the first coup, right? And then the first coup had it rolled over into the second coup, just mere months later, and then the devastating civil war, the result of which we still haven't recovered from to this day, right? And the result of which, the results, right? And the fact that it was never truly properly resolved, because we are supposed to exist as a single country, as a single entity following the civil war, but then that means you will have to do proper reconciliation. You have to resolve the issues that led to the civil war properly, things that weren't really done following it, right? That is the reason why we still are dealing with the results of the civil war till this day. Until we resolve it, it will still keep recurring. It's not about criticizing them, it's simply common sense, and it's what will happen, right? Now, so it led to the first coup, and then the country just rolled downstream into military and authoritarianism. Following that, we get to understand things that happened and that led to this, right? But why with all these disturbances, why did it not foster, proper discussion? And why did we not have a more constructive approach, right, to deal with these problems we were having back then? Why did we have to resort to military rule? This was because it was part of a larger trend worldwide in this period of time, right, in the mid 20th century, right, where the trend we're talking about is the attractiveness of that fascism as a system of governance had for various people world over then, right? So a short talk on fascism now. Ada, what will you say fascism is?
Fascism, I think it's a form of far-right governance, authoritarianism characterized by the dictatorial power. You understand? Like when you think fascism now, the first person that comes to mind is
there are a bunch of people that come to mind. Of course, first, of course, the most famous of them, the most famous fascist of all time is Hitler, of course.
Hitler. The style was like the suppress the opposition forcibly.
Right.
It entails you forcibly suppressing the opposition, and there's this strong regimentation of the society.
They tend to have it in mind to forcibly impose discipline on society, right? So if you look at the rise of fascism in Germany, that's the rise of Hitler too. You hear of cases of things like Hitler always walking around with a whip in his belt hole, right? Stuff like that. I know you find cases of this everywhere. Fascism rose to power, of course, too, or fascists rose to power.
The movement started after the First World War.
Yeah, immediately following the years following the First. In fact, during the World War, that's when it even started in Italy. Right, I think the first major fascist ruler in Europe was Mussolini. Right, it was following his march on Rome. You know, there are a lot of talk about that. But yeah, following his march on Rome, he became the first fascist ruler in Europe. And then there was Hitler, and then I think the other major fascist ruler was Franco, Spain's Franco.
The guy that helped Madrid, bro.
Come on. Come on, just because you're a Barcelona fan, you don't have to bring all that up. Alright, so this system of government,
our military of head,
it proved particularly attractive to the people who became the military head of state. Right, the military guys here, so that's what actually made them to seize power.
So you're basically insinuating that our military head of states were basically fascists.
Yeah, for the most part they were. In fact, and that this is not my own word, right? So you don't have to quote me on this, but it's not my own word. The thing is, because you look at any textbook, you find them being described as military juntas. You know, spelled with a J. Military juntas, and the word junta, you know, is Spanish, right? And it's what is used to describe as the fascists who take power in the fashion that our own military guys took power back in the day. So they are fascists, and I did not call them that. It's not my own word. All right. Right. So they found the system very attractive, and they used it to particularly devastating effect, right? And the results of how they used it is things we still see in our society today, as we'll discuss a bit later on, of course. However, so the military rule lasted for the greater part of how many years now? From 66 down to 99. That's about 33 years, right?
Yes.
With, of course, it was interspersed by some brief periods of civilian rule. We had one from in the late 70s to early 80s, and then one in the mid 90s. So mostly just not more than 5 years of civilian rule between. For the most part, the most part of the 33 years there, we had mostly military leaders. In the country. Now, we said we had military rulers from then till 99, but actually the last military dictator we had was died in 98, Sani Abacha, right? So following the death of Sani Abacha in 98, the country started transitioning toward democratic civil rule. Actually, following 98, following his death, Abdusalam Abubakar rose to the power, right? But he was also a military guy, but then he was the one who fostered the transition to the civilian rule. So we had the democratic elections in 99. Right, but then, so the country actually transitioning towards civilian rule, but even with all that, there was to be no easy escape from the past, right? This was because, you see, the newly formed political parties, right, that were to participate in the 99 elections then, right? Most of the parties were headed, right, or at least they had these influential figures among them that participated actively in the authoritarian regimes that we're just coming out of, right? Not just the immediate ones, but of course the ones of that preceded it too also, right? I don't need to name names here, right? But then you know who they all are, all the leaders we've had in the past years. If they weren't active participants, the people who were the leaders themselves were heavily backed by people who were active participants, right? And of course, including yours truly.
I'm on set, please don't choose it.
Including yours truly too. Well then, you know who I'm referring to? Yeah, like that's it. You don't have to name specific names. All right. So Right. So, like we're saying, so with this, there was no actual easy escape for Nigeria and for Nigerians, right? From the immediate past, and meaning that, the populace, who are still yet to recover from the trauma of the various forms of oppression, the various forms of oppression, including the societal and economic oppression employed by the regimes, were kind of forced upon their oppressors again, likening their plight to that of a rape victim who is being forced to marry their attacker. Right? That was the plight of Nigerians. That is the plight of Nigerians today. Right? So, in other words, we started this episode asking a question, tentatively.
Are we right-wing? This is our point.
If you're a right-wing society, right? If you're a right-wing society, and if that is
I think that would be huge
problems, the problems of our society, Nigerian society, right? Because that's what we're driving at this.
Yes.
Are we a right-wing society? Is that part of our problems? Right? So we've gone on to discuss that, of course, what a right-wing society is, what it employs in society, what it banks upon, and what it imposes on society. Right. Now, there are various things we could look at, various aspects of Nigerian society we could look at to further see the impact of these ideologies on the country and on the society, of course, right? Including that for one now, right, the presence of strong men, right, in quote, as against strong functional institutions. This is something that you find that is typical of right-wing societies, right? When you have people who seem to be more powerful than entire institutions.
Yeah.
And that's what we have
present in
Nigeria, right? You have institutions who are supposed to carry out certain duties, certain roles.
You have men that can just overrule them.
Exactly. And you find that the institutions most of the time are incapable of carrying out those mandates of theirs because of them being throttled, right? Being strangled by, in many cases, individuals.
That's
right?
A solid point.
Now, aspect you could look at is, the rule of law and if it applies equally to all. I think, if you stop the average Joe or the average OB or the average Ada on the Nigerian street, and you make the statement to him that
you think
the rule of law applies equally to all in Nigeria, he was going to scoff in your face, and if you insist, he probably spit in it too.
You probably receive a dirty slap.
Well, it might not go that far, but it definitely will laugh at your face. Right? The rule of law, right? We have the rule of law in Nigeria.
I don't think so.
It just doesn't apply equally, and it doesn't apply consistently too.
Is it the rule of law?
Right? Is it the rule of law? That's the question, right? That's the question. So, answer for yourself if you think that is typical of right-wing societies, of right-wing politics overall, right?
Police brutality.
Right, yes, systematic oppression and police brutality. You look at right-wing societies of old. Look at Nazi Germany.
You have the SS.
Look at Jim Crow United States. In fact, present-day United States of Africa. Right, and you look at the way in which they employ the institutions of the state to carry out systematic oppression of certain classes of the society.
They are affiliated.
We could go into this and break it down, but of course I'm sure you already get the gist of what we're driving at, right? The Holocaust, Jim Crow in America, the suppression of black rights, of everything that led up to the Black Lives Movement and the riots and protests of last year, that even got traction worldwide, right? and link all that to the EndSARS protests that took place in Nigeria too last year, right? And police brutality too of the masses over here too. Now, so that's with that. Also, we have the suppression of dissenting voices in society.
We want to challenge them.
Right. Now, this is a particularly disturbing one because potentially disturbing one because when you have things like this, right, like suppressing dissenting voices, it tends to split the society, right? Because if you, for one, don't happen to be what is being described as a dissenting voice, if you happen to go along with the policies of the government, then you will not suffer from this kind of suppression.
Yes.
So you find that people tend to be in support of the government when
Because of that.
they oppress other people who they don't identify with. Right? And it's something that we see here too in Nigeria, right? You see, for example, people make allusions to what happens to the Shiites in Kaduna, right? Granted, they couldn't be said to be in the right overall, right? But there is the rule of law. There is the due process to follow to deal with them, right? To be fair, right? They weren't treated fairly. They weren't treated fairly, right? Not according to how the law, right? Not according to due process, how they were supposed to be treated. They weren't treated fairly. And well, please don't quote me on this too. I'm just a scientist. Don't count me as a dissenting voice. Well, actually, Ada, would you like to be a dissenting voice?
I feel if we are not able to deliver on our next episode, we should just know that too.
Yes, we will classify as dissenting voices.
That will further buttress our point.
Alright then. But then, okay, one last aspect we'll be looking at here is the exploitative use of basic rights and amenities. I mean, and this one here is one that will hit hard. Will hit hard on many Nigerians. Because yes, it's a thing we see every day, every 4 years. At least, if not every day. What has been coined stomach infrastructure, for example, right? Yeah, they promise the perpetual promise of electricity and water
security, provide security for all.
Right. So I think we could go on and on about that, but I think you get what we are driving at on that too.
So,
dear listeners, that's about that, right? I mean, we could go on and actually look into the history and talk about the history of political parties in Nigeria and the various political parties in the various republics. But this is just the general gist about what they all stood for and what really happened, because it's still the same thing. It's still the same thing. Okay, maybe in the first political parties there were no military minded people there, but also you find that those political parties were also the ones that were heavily influenced by the traditional rulers, right? So it's basically the same story repeating itself over and over again. So that's why we didn't really go into the history and bringing out specific examples about them, because it's still the same basic story, right, all over again, right? So that's about it for the episode, right? So like we said earlier when we were starting, this is to be our last episode for the year, right? And the next time we'll be for us will be next year, God's willing. It will be way past the new year anyways by the time we come back, and in the meantime we'll do some signs, we'll work on the show, make some changes, try to
a lot of improvements,
right, and include some improvements. There are certain aspects we're trying to improve in the show, and certain new aspects we're trying to introduce to the show, right? And so please don't be angry with us.
We know you're going to miss it.
We will be back.
We know you're going to miss our voices.
Yeah, we will miss doing this too.
Our content.
Right, in the meantime.
Yeah.
In the meantime, you can
just listen.
Catch up with us on social media. Right. Whenever we get back, you'll get to know first if you follow us, right? And then where do you follow us on social media? You catch us
on Audiomark.
We're on Audiomark.
On Facebook, on Twitter,
on we're on Instagram,
on Snapchat,
we're on YouTube,
on Discord, on Reddit.
No, we don't have Discord. They don't have a Reddit subreddit yet. You're not on Snapchat yet too. But anyways, you catch us everywhere. We are available at 0100 Nigeria. 0100 Nigeria is spelled 01-00 numerals 0100 Nigeria. Right. So. That's where you get us, right? And if you follow us on Facebook, you always catch our new releases. You see all our social media handles there too, and links to the social media pages too, of course. So
that's it, guys.
We catch you on the next one, however long it takes us to come up with that, right? This is
Ada, bye.
And the scientist is turning out.
Ada out.
Catch you on the next one. Thanks.